For a couple of years now, Nick, the perception has been that F2 and Fairfax have been successful by rationalising the business rather than perhaps acquiring new businesses or looking at generating real revenues. But a profit's been turned in the past year without cutting as many costs. Is that a fair assessment?
I think after the Olympics, we had a lot of costs that we needed to cut because that was after the dot-com boom, and we got through that period and we suddenly worked out what actually worked online and what didn't. So we did a lot of cost cutting in 2000 and 2001. The last couple of years, though, we've been adding costs back to the F2 business, and we reached break even in terms of cash just in the last couple of for the last half. We just announced that last week or the week before, and that's really been on the back of really strong revenue growth. So our revenues grew about 80% in FY04 and FY03 and about 50% this year. So it's really been about strong revenue growth, and we haven't really been, we always prune the costs and make sure we manage that well, but we're not focused on, we're not going to go through another round of cost cutting in the foreseeable future.
What about F2 as a standalone business, if you will, within the Fairfax group? How has F2 contributed to growth, both from a revenue perspective, share of market perspective as well?
Well, our revenues, just trying to get all the numbers right here, but I think our revenues have gone up from about $14 million in FY03 or FY02, sorry, so it was 2 years ago now, and this year will be in the high 30s. So there you see we've added about more than $20 million of revenue with a little bit of cost increase, but not too much. And I think that's on the financial side, but more importantly actually for Fairfax is that we've really built up capabilities in online and digital that are brand new for the business. So I think if you asked guys like Fred Hilmer, the CEO of Fairfax, what he thinks about F2, he would say, yeah, the money's great, but strategically it's very important for Fairfax to have a really strong digital division because that's where a large part of the media future in Australia and around the world is going to be. And I think that's what we've done really well, and for the long term for Fairfax, that's more important, I think, than whether or not we made money this year or next year or last year.
I guess within the context of digital, that's a good point that you bring up. Where do you see perhaps the Fairfax properties, F2 properties, extending outside of the web in the next year or two? Do you think that's going to be a bigger component of your business, SMS and mobile technologies? Yeah,
definitely. I think we're a business, but we're also, it's really important that we experiment and we get to know what all these new platforms are about. So this year we're doing quite a lot of stuff in mobile and 3G already. We do a lot of multimedia, stuff like this, frankly, and we do a lot of, we're doing about 100,000 downloads a week now in terms of our multimedia content. That's really a business that is quite new for us. So I'd see us moving in terms of platforms. We just want to be where people are. If people are looking at news and classifieds on the web or on digital formats like mobile phones or 3G or screens on buses, we don't know. We're agnostic as to where they are, and where we've got to be is where they are, frankly.
You really attract an audience that are high income earners and high spenders, and they're really the tribal leaders or the thought leaders within their groups. Are these the people that guide the positioning of the properties, or do they influence the way that you position the properties and then how you price them to advertisers? Well,
I think a lot of people think that brands like the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, which are wonderful print brands and work really well online, I think one of the big differences about the web is we have a really big audience online. So we have the F2 network every month gets over 5 million Australians having a look at one or more of their properties, which is a big number. So I think we do, certainly the people who are, the ABs as they call them, the ones who are rich and the ones who are at the forefront of trends and stuff like that, they're definitely our core. Like they're on F2 and they're our most rusted on loyal users. But we're not just about people who drive BMWs at all. It's one of the unique things I think that the web has allowed Fairfax to do is really expand its footprint dramatically. We have over 1 million people every month who use our sites from overseas. They're people that may have been familiar with one of our brands. They might be Australians, they might not, but I think it's opening up a whole lot of new opportunities for us. Apart from the Darlinghurst cafe set in Sydney and the equivalent in Melbourne, it's a mass medium, and that's the way we look at it.
Given that you're describing to me an audience that you have a greater share of online than you do offline, why do you give the information away for free online?
It's an interesting question. It's a question that we get asked a lot internally at Fairfax. I guess the first thing to say is we set out to be the biggest and build the biggest and most valuable business online in every category we participate in. So we're not embarrassed that we lead in the news space. We're proud of it. We've done a really good job there. And the question for us is, we're not about making money today so much, but what's the future of the business in 3 or 4 years. So we've got a great position online now. We do give away a lot of content for free. We charge advertisers. We monetize it through advertising. But what you're seeing us do now is we're starting to launch more premium services. We have archives that are paid for. We're launching sort of premium services and content that we are starting to charge people for, because we think there's an opportunity there, but we want to remain the #1 news network in Australia.
News websites in the United States like the New York Times, the LA Times, and I believe the Chicago Tribune as well, use systems like Tacoma to measure audience offline and online, and then leverage that information to better service advertisers. Is that something we can expect to see from F2 in the next year or two?
Well, what we are doing right now is starting to ask users to register for access to our sites. So we've started with Real Footy and Rugby Heaven, because that's where the fanatical sports fans are just starting to go back to those sites now as the temperature's cool, and that's going very well for us. And what we're doing there is asking people for demographics, who they are, where they live, and we'll be on the back of that offering advertisers. For the advertiser, they'll get the ability to be able to target their advertising better, and we'll obviously charge them for that. But it'll also help us, I think, understand who our users are, what they want, and it'll help us improve our sites faster.
It's an interesting point you bring up, the rugby and the winter sports sites. Is that where you're getting a bulk of your traffic, and would that perhaps explain the hangover of traffic you get in Q4 and perhaps the lack of inventory that's available at that time of year?
Oh, I think on the sports side, the reason we started with sports is because people, if you are into AFL or rugby union, you'll crawl over cut glass to get to the content, and that's why we thought these guys are the ones who will test registration there. It's going very well, and you will see us roll that out to the big news sites like the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age. Those sites get an enormous amount of traffic. The sports sites are popular but small, but the news sites get the bulk of it. So I think that's where the real opportunity for us will lie. As for, do we have advertising inventory available in Q4? I'd be horrified if we weren't able to take someone's campaign. If we had an advertiser who had money and an advertising schedule they wanted to execute, I'm sure we can find a way to help them out. So I'm sure the sales guys could do that.
Oh, that's good to hear for any advertisers that are looking for inventory in Q4 this year. Classifieds, I guess moving on to classifieds, is another very important part of your business, or has traditionally been, particularly The Age, where they position themselves as the #1 classifieds business in Australia through the 70s. It's obviously a crucial part of revenue growth at Fairfax, and a crucial part of your revenues today. How important is it within the online strategy?
It's the classifieds are the most important, the #1 priority for us now. We have a fantastic position in news. We want to cement it, but in classifieds, online classifieds now, that's where we put most of our effort and thinking into how can we be #1, not just in New South Wales and Victoria, but right around the country in jobs, cars and motors. And we've got a lot of work to do. We have a very, very good position in each of the 3 categories, particularly real estate, but we're very committed to getting the #1 spots in each of them, and not just in New South Wales and Victoria, but right around the country.